Happy Friday. Welcome to PCAP's final webinar for our 7th annual Prairie's Got the Goods Week. My name is Caitlin Rose Seiler, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. Today, Dr. Brian McConkey and Sayeed Mahadi from Viresco Solutions, Inc. will be speaking about generating financial incentives for conserving grasslands through carbon credits. I'd like to start by stating we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For millennia, they've worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I would like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. Before we get going, I'd like to mention that this is the final webinar for Prairie's Got the Goods Week, but all of our past webinars can be found on the PCAP YouTube channel, and this one will be uploaded there in the near future as well. If you still want more webinars, check out our Native Prairie Speaker Series. We have a couple good webinars coming up there as well. And a reminder to our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, just type into the questions section of the webinar dashboard at any time during the presentation, and questions will be answered towards the end of the webinar. I'd like to take a moment to note that financial support for today's webinar is provided by our presenting sponsors, Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association and Wildlife Habitat Canada. Our supporting sponsor is Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association, and in-kind support has been provided by Viresco Solutions, Inc. So we have two presenters today, so I'm pleased to introduce both of them. Dr. Brian McConkey is a chief scientist for Viresco Solutions, Inc., an environmental consulting firm whose vision is mainstreaming sustainability by helping their clients in the agriculture value chain to strategically navigate the complex and evolving world of sustainability. Prior to joining Viresco Solutions in 2019, Brian had 33 years of diverse experience in agri-environmental research, technology application, and science policy with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Swift Current. He is an author or co-author of over 200 scientific papers and book chapters covering soil and plant processes, soil health, water agriculture, interrelationships, impacts of climate change on agriculture, quantifying carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions at field to national scales, and the assessment of the sustainability of agricultural production. Sayeed Mahadi has over 12 years of working experience in leading innovative projects on carbon offsets, sustainability, nature-based solutions, climate change, renewable energy, and international development. At Viresco, he conducts research and advises on policies related to sustainable agriculture, nature-based solutions, carbon markets, greenhouse gas, accounting and reporting, and sustainability strategy, manages public and private sector consulting contracts, and coordinates scientific workshops and meetings. Prior to joining Viresco Solutions, he worked for Radical Group Inc. and Practical Action. Sayeed is managing the Canada Grassland Protocol pilot project, collaborating with Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association. And the objective of this project is to pilot the CAR Canada Grasslands Protocol on grasslands across Canada to provide an alternative revenue stream to landowners for the conservation of at-risk grasslands. So with that, I will pass it over.
Well, thanks, Caitlin, and thanks to PCAP and the other organizers of Prairie's Got the Goods for this opportunity to speak on this. I'll be starting off. So as everyone saw, this is an important opportunity, and we're going to be reporting on the work that's gone on to make this actually happen. How do we get generate some financial incentives for the value of grasslands for their carbon credits? Next slide, Sayeed. And maybe you could get it to full screen mode too.
No, it's not full screen mode. Oh, sorry. Is it okay now?
It's still just on the edit mode.
Interesting.
Yeah, I see the same as Brian. I know we just tested it and it worked perfect. Can you click launch from beginning?
There
we go.
That looks good. Yeah. So I think many of you have seen this ad on TV from the federal government. It's pointing out some of the nature-based solutions that are available for to contribute to Canada's target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, in fact, reach net zero in 2050. And so it's really interesting to see grasslands feature so prominently, because it's not something we've seen that much of before, where grasslands are sort of getting primetime exposure, particularly by the federal government. But it really is recognition of how important that grasslands can be. Next slide. And so grasslands are an important part of the carbon cycle. Canada actually has an amazing amount of the world's soil carbon in total, about 20%. Now, a lot of that's in our huge areas of peatlands, but it is something in this, and is why, of course, Canada is paying particular attention to how we manage our lands, and can we, retain and also even build the soil organic carbon in different ways. And so if we look just at the prairie grassland, it looks like it's actually when we consider looking at how CO2 is moving from the atmosphere, it appears to be a sink, and perhaps about 72 kilograms of carbon a hectare a year. It maybe doesn't sound like an awful lot, but is important when you consider the area of grasslands, and the fact that these are have been in existence, like if we're talking about native grasslands, for thousands and thousands of years, and that they're still acting as a sink is really substantial. And if we break that grassland, though, then we lose a lot of the carbon. Like essentially, grassland averages 20% more carbon than when it's been converted to cropland. Next slide. And so, a recent study looked at sort of all the different sort of natural climate solutions or nature-based solutions that could work, and identified a number of them. And you can see that collectively these could have an important role in Canada's total emissions. Like up to 11% of our emissions could be mitigated simply by looking at these nature-based solutions. And of course, some of those were in agricultural lands that more intensely managed, where there's opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's also particularly conserving wetlands, or even reestablishing wetlands is another important place where nature-based solutions can do it. Obviously, there's opportunities within the forests to manage them to create carbon. But then one thing that popped out was how important that grasslands, and particularly the conservation of grasslands, could be, and it could account for like 17% of the potential of nature-based solutions. Now, in this particular report, when they talked about grasslands, they were talking about all essentially perennials, so hayland, tame pasture, as well as native or naturalized permanent grasslands in that study. But a lot of that potential does exist in the permanent grasslands. Next slide. So this, so this idea then is, how do we avoid the grassland conversion? So, so we really need, the pressure has been on recently, anyways, to convert a lot of the grassland to cropland, or even other land uses, including, subdivisions or solar farms or whatever. There's lots of pressures on the land use. So how do we maintain that? And so, in that particular study I was talking about, look at nature-based solutions, they said, well, we could actually probably, realistically protect easily a couple, 2.5 million hectares, or somewhere in the order of 6 million acres, or more, 7 million acres, over 10 years of native prairies and tame grassland. On the biggest opportunity, Saskatchewan, Alberta. There's also opportunities in Alberta that would, in Ontario, those would primarily be tame grasslands. But there's a lot of potential here. And as we said before, this could be about 17% of the total overall opportunity for nature-based solutions, and a lot of that is available at relatively low cost of, at least in the study, of per unit or per ton of CO2 equivalent, $50 a ton, and that would be certainly, certainly the current federal prices are in that order, but what we'll be talking about in terms of marketing this as a credit, the prices can be different than that. So, but it does indicate that there, the indications are that there's a lot of potential there. So this pathway of avoided grassland conversion essentially is just there to protect that carbon bank that's already been stored in the soil. Next slide. So how do we transfer this? How do we get that opportunity and transfer it back and get that credit to provide a financial reward for those landowners for conserving grassland? And essentially that really comes back to this offset market. So give credit for avoiding those greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really being, even though there's many benefits to conserving grassland, this is really just providing the financial incentive based on its simply on its climate change impact. And so to do this, then the key thing, what credit, what is exactly that credit? So what is called the baseline, or what we're assuming would happen, would be that the land would be converted to cropland, and then so the project emissions are for conserving that land as grasslands, and the difference is the avoided emissions. So there's sort of the avoided emissions, and there's emissions while it's grassland, because there's usually livestock grazing on it, maybe other operations, haying or whatever that creates some emissions, and then but the main emissions are that are avoided are when it's as cropland. So so the avoided emissions then are really the difference in between what would happen if it was cropland, less what is being emitted just by continuing to being grassland. And so this net reduction then becomes an offset of greenhouse gas, and greenhouse gas emitters can buy and use this offset for their emissions. So that's where the money is really coming from. It's coming from greenhouse gas emitters. It's not coming from the government or others, but other sort of well, it could come from nonprofits. But I mean, it's essentially meant to be a sort of a win-win. So the emitters win and the landowners win in providing this service. Next slide. So again, I think it is really critical to remember sort of when we talk about a baseline, the baseline isn't what you think it would be, the baseline being maintaining the grassland. In fact, the baseline assumption is that you converted it to cropland. And so we're not generating any credits for any sequestration that's occurring on the grassland, even though some might be. This is just because of conservativeness requirement for practical offsets. And so obviously then we're really, because we're assuming that it will be converted, that knowing and picking that land that is at the highest risk of conversion is fundamental to the integrity of any sort of offset that's generated. And so a project then is really a deliberate effort to conserve the grassland, and in Canada, this is being achieved with a qualified land conservation agreement. So that then because that is an easement on the title, then it is very much it is the act is documented, I guess, that it is going to be protected. And then and again, I said the emission from the project, from just that, from conserving, has to be considered. Next slide. So what are offsets and what are carbon markets? Well, carbon offset is a tradable unit. So it just enters onto a market. There's buyers and sellers, and then the price is determined by the balance between supply and demand. So one carbon offset or one credit would be 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. which is either reduced or sequestered. So either you reduce emissions, like in this case, basically we're talking about avoided conversion or reducing emissions, or in some cases, not for grasslands, but it could be like sequestration, like new forests, or improving cropland management to increase its soil organic carbon. But we need a protocol. We need a methodology that considers all the factors that go into the conserving and the amount of greenhouse gas emission avoidance is achieved by that, and that's called a protocol. And there's also, there's also a market regulator or registry that is responsible for the protocol, and also then responsible for providing the market of the credits that are created through that protocol. So the market regulator sets a standard specific to the market. So they kind of set up the market, they set up the protocol, and they make sure that every credit comes in has gone through some sort of verification, and then they stand behind that credit. And most markets adhere to the same international ISO standards for high level, but they all differ in specifics, and there's lots of gray areas, as we'll be discussing later. And so the Grassland Project's protocol was approved and used for use by the Climate Action Reserve voluntary market for Canada. So the Climate Action Reserve is a U.S. Not-for-profit organization based in California. And so it's created this, and it's the market regulator. Next slide. Yeah, so you have these emission reductions, and then we have emitters that want the carbon credit. So you have to establish this project under the protocol, so that then once that project is underway, then credits are issued and put onto the marketplace. Then there's a transaction, so the emitter then says, okay, this is this, and as I said, agrees to the price, and so the payment is made. And then those credits are retired because the emitter is now using them to offset some of their emissions, but the financial flows back to the project developer, and then some of the money flows back to the land managers and owners that are achieving the emission reduction. Next slide. So this particular protocol is the first offset protocol for avoided grassland conversion, specifically for Canada. There are other grassland avoidance conversions that are available, but they're only for the United States. So this is the only one, the first one for Canada. First, I still believe the only one, yeah. So the offset is for the United version. So as I said, it's the net avoided emissions of the baseline minus the project. So what goes into the baseline emissions? So is that the land will be converted to cropland. We also assume that if there's any wetlands on that grassland, that at least the more the ones that aren't as least permanent wetlands, so class 1 to 3 in the wetland inventory, would be assumed also to be drained on conversion. But we know there could be shrubs, and there should be some trees that also removed during conversion, but they were excluded. That's simply, again, to be conservative. One of the requirements of an offset is that its estimates are conservative, and because it would be very costly to measure the carbon in the shrubs and trees on every grassland piece that would be under this protocol, it was easier. It's, in this case, it's both conservative and also saves a lot of expense to simply ignore that carbon. And the emissions from the conversion of the cropland then are included. Because it isn't actually converted, we have to decide what kind of numbers would be used. So we use what the defaults, and those would be the numbers that Canada uses to report its national greenhouse gas emissions, the so-called national inventory report. So the baseline, there's a loss of soil organic carbon from that grasslands to that for carbon, and this loss is an emission. But there's also other emissions from cropping. So if we will be applying, or soon we'll be applying fertilizers, And so there'll be some nitrous oxide emissions from that. There'll also be nitrous oxide emissions simply from the loss of the grassland soil organic carbon, and that's brought in, and also emissions from the fossil fuel use from machinery operation as cropland. But emissions from fertilizer manufacture aren't included, and that's again part of the rules, I guess, of the particular market regulator in this case. Next slide. So again, the organic carbon loss is certainly the largest emission. So this shows in 10 years, or the 10-year periods after breaking. So first 10 years, the losses are much higher, and then they slowly drop over time. But even 30 years out, they're still quite significant. And this shows really not that much difference between sort of the drier parts of the prairies and the more humid parts of the prairies. Next slide. And so again, what are the project emissions? Well, it's obviously the emissions from the grazing livestock and any machinery operations, and that'd be based on sort of the actual management of that grassland. So it depends on the stocking rate and whatever for that grassland, and also the types of livestock that might be considered. And so those, and then there'd be some additional methane emissions, because I remember in the baseline we said that some of the ephemeral wetlands would be drained. So now we have to consider there'll also be some emissions from those ephemeral wetlands when they're not drained and retained as part of the grasslands. And if there's also any grassland burning, then there's that. And then there's also what's called leakage. In other words, if you protect some grassland, that could lead to incentive to maybe to look at maybe less desirable grassland, but to convert it, and leakage rates. I think there's been some playing around with this. I think at one time it was 20%. I think it's now maybe settled on about 10%. But it's just, again, to try to be conservative, to make sure that we're not overestimating the amount of emissions that are avoided. And this has become really important because a lot of the buyers are very concerned about the perception that it's, that protecting things isn't as valuable as actually reducing emissions. And there's actually a tool that's been developed as part of this to simplify all the calculations of credit. Next slide. And so now I'll let Sayeed then talk about the project, the pilot project that is actually test driving this protocol in the real world.
Thank you so much, Brian. So I'll be using my second screen to look into the presentation. So I'll be maybe looking that side. So I'll be telling our experience for while we were implementing this Climate Action Reserve Canada Grassland Protocol pilot project. So we are implementing that project. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, everything's there.
Of course.
Will it not advance?
Oh,
I think we just lost it.
yeah, okay, I'll be just launching that again. Can you see my screen again? Perfect. Okay, so we are implementing this project collaborating with Canadian Forest and
I can't see it yet. Brian, can you see it?
No, I can't see it either.
Okay.
Okay, just one second. I'll be launching that again. I don't know why.
No problem.
Is it okay now?
No.
Do you want me to send it to you again?
Yeah, that's really nice.
1 second here.
Is it okay now?
Nope.
No.
Interesting.
That's unusual. It was working just fine. Brian, you don't happen to have a copy of the presentation on your end, do you?
Yeah, I do. Let's see if I can.
Okay.
Is it okay now?
No, still nothing. On the webinar dashboard where it says sharing, just click on there might be a play button or a pause button.
Is it okay now?
No. Why don't I send it to you again and then see if there's a drop-down menu and you
Sure.
can
Yep.
select just the PowerPoint this time on the drop-down menu.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
No.
Brian, do you have it handy on your end? Maybe just for the sake of time, we can try putting it on yours.
Okay, I don't see the screen.
Oh, I'll send it to you, Brian.
I mean the screen share thing. Yeah. Oh, show my screen. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, there. Which, yeah. Oh. Which screen can you see?
We can't see anything yet.
Oh.
Oh, there. It says Lenovo on it. It looks like your background.
Extra.
Okay.
Under the sharing section, there's oh, there we go.
Yeah.
You got it.
Okay. Could you please launch it?
There. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Sorry, really sorry about that. Next slide, please, Brian. So I was stating that Viresco Solutions Inc. is implementing this project in collaboration with Canadian Forest and Grassland Association. So the main objective of this project is to test the technical and practical feasibility of the Climate Action Reserve Canada Grassland Project Protocol, and also simplify the processes and develop some recommendations for the updated version of the protocol. Then also, we want to develop and test commercial and contractual terms and conditions, and also define the role of these each partners and stakeholders in this project. And then the third point is we want to test the remote sensing technologies to reduce the carbon project cost, and also we want to make the process easy for the landowners in terms of data collection and sharing. And then the fourth objective is we would like to demonstrate the feasibility of for a protocol which is suitable for the Canadian compliance market. Next slide, please. So as we have already mentioned that this is a pilot project, so this project is funded by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We have also industry funding from Shell Canada, and Viresco and CFGA is implementing this project. We have 5 land trusts working with us, and we have a project developer which is Radical in our project team, and also for the verification related things we have Bright Spot Climate here who is supporting us in the third-party verification. And also we are working with Climate Action Reserve to understand some of the processes and activities mentioned in the protocol. And we have Regrow who are supporting us in terms of understanding the use of remote sensing technologies to simplify the processes for our projects. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we actually started this project a long time ago. So that was somewhere in 2017. So that time we initiated the process for developing this protocol. Then slowly we have got that protocol approved in 2019, and then we were looking for funding to do a pilot project so that we can understand the activities and processes mentioned in the protocol. And we would also wanted to test that the processes and activities mentioned in the protocol, it works practically during the project implementation. So that's why we were looking for funds, and we got funding from AFC and Shell Canada. And that time we have launched our project officially in 2021, and then in 2023 this is kind of the last phase of our project, where we'll be completing our project pretty soon. Next slide, please. So one of the interesting aspect of this protocol is we have to really understand the risk of conversion, and as well as we have to prevent that conversion. And if we can do that, that means we'll be able to generate carbon credits successfully. So from the risk of conversion side, the protocol suggests to include native and tame grasslands, and the project can consider up to 10% tree cover. And then the project have to exclude open water sources, and then also the project have to also prove that the proposed activities are additional to the business as usual scenario. So for that, we have to go through this legal test, suitability test, and financial threshold test. So legal test is that there is no legal restriction on the property to convert to cropland. Then the suitability test is something like the soil class of the property is really suitable for agriculture purpose. So that means we are mainly considering soil class 1 to 4. And the financial pressure is something to understand that the cropland value of the property is higher than the grassland value of the property. So the property owner is feeling that pressure to convert that grassland to cropland. And also we have to understand other barriers as well, like slope barriers. And in our project, we have done the slope layer assessment for the prairie region, and we have found that less than 12% slope layer will be considered to make a property eligible. Next slide. Yeah. Then from the prevention of conversion perspective, so the property owner have to sign a conservation easement so that the property will not be converting the grassland to cropland in future. And next, please. Yeah, and also there should be annual monitorings to track the reversal track the reversal in the project. And also there is a ecosystem health assessment, so which we have to do once in every 6 years. So ecosystem. What ecosystem health assessment does is that it tries to understand the condition of the grassland, so that we can say whether the grassland is in healthy state. And obviously, when we will try to generate carbon credit in this project, we have to go through the third-party verification, so that the verifier can look into all these documents which we have prepared, and the verifier ensures that it follows each and every procedures mentioned in the protocol, and that's how we'll be generating carbon credit and serializing that at Climate Action Registry. So in this project, one of our big learning was to understand the cropland premium assessment. So to assess the cropland premium, we need the cropland rental rate and also the pasture rental rate. What we have found that these are not really publicly available information, so that's why we had to go through the government published reports, data sets, and also we had to discuss with the area participants and as well as the land appraisers' experience to understand the cropland rental rate and as well as the pasture rental rate. Next, please. And also we have taken support from Regrow in this project to understand the slope layer for the prairie region. And as I have mentioned earlier, so after doing that assessment, and we wanted to take a conservative approach, so we have taken 12% as our final slope threshold, which falls in the strong slope category. So if the slope layer is more than 12%, that land is not really eligible for cropland purpose, and that's why we will not be including those properties for our carbon credit project. Next slide, please. And as Brian was mentioning, so when we initiate this type of carbon offset project, we have to go through this additionality test criteria. So for testing the additionality, at first we have to go through the legal viability test, which means that there is no existing legal protection in the property. So normally we see that the privately owned lands, those are passing the legal viability test, and the reason is that there is not really any existing legal protection in those properties. And First Nations land and also the public lands, those could be eligible if there is no legal protection in those properties. But what we see normally, the First Nation lands and the public lands, they have some sort of like complicated legal policies and agreements, and because of that it becomes really hard to prove that those properties doesn't have any type of legal protection. But those could be eligible if it can be proved that there is no existing legal protection on those properties. Then also the protocol suggests that to prove additionality, we have to go through this now physical suitability test, which is mainly looking into the soil and vegetation of that property. So mainly when we say soil, that means like understanding the soil class and soil texture. So in the protocol suggests that soil class 1 to 4 is mainly eligible, and to understand the soil class, we mainly use the LSRS dataset for Alberta, and for rest of the region we use CLI dataset. And also the protocol suggests that the property could include up to 10% tree cover and also have to exclude the open water sources. And also, as I have mentioned earlier, so the property have to also prove that there's a financial pressure to cultivate, and that's why we try to use this cropland premium, and that is kind of the indicator for us whether the property will pass the financial threshold test. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in this project, as I was mentioning that, understanding all these data sets for determining all these tests required to pass the additionality was really important, and that's why we had to identify all these data sets for determining the soil class, soil texture, and water sources, and also the forest layer. Then we also had to define the eligibility of the crown lands and indigenous lands, and I have already mentioned that the complexity before. And then also we identified the data set for determining the cropland premium assessment, and it was one of the challenging part for us, because this cropland rental rate and the grassland rental rate, those are not really publicly available information. So that's why we had to go through some government reports and also talk with the area participants to understand that. Next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility, so the property will be only eligible if it is grassland for last 10 years, and both native and tame could be included. Next. And also, to understand the risk of conversion, we have to go through this legal requirement test, suitability threshold test, and financial threshold test, which I have already described. And small projects could be also included, which can be aggregated to form a cooperative and could generate carbon credit. So here, what we have in our project, what we try to understand is that how we can work with various government programs like ecological gift program, and we develop a simplified approach to work with the landowners who are interested in receiving federal tax benefit from the ecological gift program. Then also we develop the streamlined process for doing the performance standard test, which is mainly the financial threshold test and also the suitability test. And also we have developed a GIS-based screening tool to test to get a general estimation of the eligible project areas, and it gives us a really good understanding about the grassland carbon opportunity of the property even before enrolling the project at Climate Action Reserve. So this is our GIS-based screening tool, which we use to estimate the grassland carbon of a property. And this includes all these layers, which I mentioned in some of my previous slides. So this checks that whether the grassland is grassland for last 10 years, then whether the property is privately owned, and it also excludes the forest layer. It also excludes the open water sources, and also it checks for soil class 1 to 4, and also it excludes the slope layer more than 12%. Now coming to the some of the basic requirement for this project. So to participate in this project, the property owner have to sign the qualified land conservation agreement, which is the conservation easement. And if they are interested to sign that, then we can move forward with this project. And also another important condition is that there should not be any breaking of ground. And there are some activities which are allowed, like seeding, fertilizer application, haying, forest harvesting, livestock grazing, or irrigation, and also recreational or economic activities like hunting and bird watching. And the main important thing is the activities you perform at the property, those should not threaten the integrity of the soil carbon stock. So that means like something like overgrazing is not really allowed. So if you allow grazing, that has to be moderate grazing, and there should be a grazing monitoring plan. Also ecosystem health assessment to understand the condition of the grassland, which is required once in every 6 years to understand the health of the grassland. And there should be also annual monitoring to track the reversal in the project. In terms of crediting, so the protocol suggests to use two options to estimate the loss of soil organic carbon from conversion to cropping. So the first option is ton accounting, which is mainly 30-year crediting period and then 100 years permanence period. And then option 2 is mainly ton year accounting, which is mainly signing an easement for a shorter term, which starts from 20 year and it can be extended up to 130 year. But the ton year accounting is not really a feasible approach sometimes, because it doesn't really give you a really good amount of carbon benefit from the project. That's why those projects sometimes is not feasible. So in our project, we really wanted to understand both approach, and also we wanted to understand the carbon benefit from both approach. So there is a publicly available tool called Canada Grass tool, which can be used to understand the carbon benefit for using these both approaches. And also in our project, we also assess the viability of term easement projects, and I was mentioning that those are not really financially feasible at this moment because the carbon benefit is so low. In terms of project development process, here the project starts with a screening process, which is mainly the basic eligibility criteria, which I have mentioned, and also the landowner should have interest in signing a QLCA, qualified land conservation easement, or have signed an easement within the last 12 months. Then we move forward to the scoping phase, where we look into all these land suitability, financial threshold, and also stacking opportunities, and try to understand the characteristics of the project area. And then using our GIS-based screening tool, we can understand the grassland carbon potential of that property. And after understanding that number, if the landowner or the property owner is interested to move forward, then we can move to the project enrollment phase. Next, please. Which is so here in terms of project development, what we have done, we have developed the communication toolkit for the grassland owners, which if you're interested in getting that communication toolkit, we can share that with you. It provides you the general information how you can participate in this kind of grassland projects. And also we simplified the process for implementing the project activities, and also we define the role of the grassland owner, project owner, and also project developer and the land trust in this project. And our GIS-based screening tool is really useful to make the decision whether a landowner or property owner should participate in this type of project based on the carbon benefit we will see from the GIS-based screening tool results. So now, after going through the GIS-based screening phase, if the landowner is interested, then we move towards the project development phase. There, the fast work will be signing the conservation easement. After signing the conservation easement, we also try to complete all the contractual formalities and agreement-related formalities. Then the project developer have to define the grazing plan, monitoring plan, and also collect the historical land use data, and also define the project start date. And then the project can be enrolled at Climate Action Reserve. And I was telling that small projects can also participate by forming a cooperative where we aggregate all these projects, and carbon credits can be generated from that aggregated project. And obviously, as per the protocol requirement, something like ecosystem health assessment should be also initiated within the phase 2 verification period. Then moving to the monitoring and verification related activities. So there should be annual monitoring, and there should be reporting period, which can be once in every 6 years, and there should be also verification during credit serialization. Next slide, please. So here we have developed the guidelines for ecosystem health assessment by taking support from two rangeland health expert, one from Alberta and one from Saskatchewan. And also we developed a grassland monitoring tool, which help us to understand the current and past land use, and as well as which helps us to do the project monitoring and reporting, and which helps us to track the reversals as well. And we also assess the long-term monitoring requirement in this project, and we also calculated and analyzed the project development related cost to understand what size of the project area could be considered for initiating a project. And also we have developed some contractual and agreement documents which are really helpful for initiating this project. So this is kind of the project timeline, if you see. So after you sign the conservation easement, the first 30 years will be your creating period, and the next 100 years will be your permanence period. And then there'll be like reporting, monitoring, and also third-party verification during the credit generation time. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I have already mentioned all these processes. So at first we go through this eligibility and project area estimation, and then we get all these deductions, and we had to do contribution in the buffer pool for generating credit. And then we have to, next please. And then also we have to go through these project development related processes and activities, and then finally we get the generated carbon credit. So if you see all these activities, there are a lot of background work going on to actually claim that carbon credit which we are generating at Climate Action Registry. So just to give you an idea, so when we try to do a project, the carbon credit can be in the range of 0.1 to 1.5 ton carbon dioxide equivalent per acre per year. So on an average, we see that 0.5 ton carbon dioxide equivalent per acre per year. And these and here you can see some of the fixed establishment cost and also variable cost. So the fixed establishment costs are mainly the registry account related cost, and also before initiating the project you have to pass the financial threshold test, and for that you have to engage a land appraiser to do the cropland premium assessment and also the GIS mapping of the property. And in terms of variable cost, you have the car account maintenance fees, and also the cost for ecosystem health assessment, the verification cost, issuance cost, and also the human resource cost, and also the monitoring and verification cost. And just to give you an idea, so there is also another crediting framework which is being developed by Vera, which is called nature credit, which will be something like carbon credit, and they will be allowing these three type of activities, which is reducing declines in biodiversity, restoring biodiversity, and maintaining intact biodiversity. And when you are trying to do this type of carbon credit projects, it is possible to stack this type of credits as well, and which can be sold to the other parties. So in a way, you can also get some additional revenue from this type of credit stacking approaches. So this is kind of the last slide. So in terms of takeaways, what we see that conserving grasslands is a great opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. and in a way, like those are really important for maintaining the soil health and also the biodiversity benefit. And generating carbon credit is one way to reward the property owner or the landowner, but there can be some other type of credits or other type of benefits which can be stacked with these carbon credits and make the project more attractive. In our pilot project, we have learned so many things. Mainly, we clarified the roles of each and every partners and stakeholders, and also try to understand all the eligibility criteria. And also we had a really better understanding about the processes and activities, and we understood all the project development related costs and how we can reduce those costs. So finally, our approach will be in future. Our approach will be sharing all these results with Alberta Environment and Parks and ECCC to kind of recommend them to add up similar type of protocol for the compliance carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you both for the awesome presentation. There's lots of questions that have come in, so we're a little time because we had some technical difficulties, but maybe we can run a few minutes over if that's okay. So I will kind of start with the beginning. So Greg says, our conservation area has a 99-year crown lease. Are we eligible?
So I'll maybe take that question. So we have to really look into that lease agreement. What are the terms and conditions? And after that, we'll be able to tell that whether that property will be eligible for generating carbon credit. But just to answer that simply, if the conservation easement was signed more than 12 months ago, then it will not be probably eligible, because that's how the protocol suggests.
Okay. So Clinton is wondering, could lands with current conservation easements be used to generate carbon offsets? And who would, if so, would the easement holder or the grant get the carbon credits, or a combination?
So again, my response will be like similar. We have to really look into the easement agreement terms and conditions and how it is written. Normally, what we see that the carbon benefit goes to the landowners. And also, I was mentioning, like, if the easement is signed within last 12 months, then that property will be eligible. Otherwise, it is not. That's how the protocol suggests.
Okay. And is the protocol publicly available?
Yes. So if you just search with the term Climate Action Reserve, Canada Grassland Project, then you will find that protocol.
Okay, perfect. That is good to know. And a listener named Glenn is wondering, how is the land management on a QLCA monitored? And specifically, who approves and monitors a grazing plan?
So you have to submit the grazing plan to the Climate Action Reserve, and they reviews that, and they try to make sure that there is not really overgrazing happening at the property. And also you have to provide your grazing data yearly. So in a way, like you are like reporting on your grazing activities to the reserve.
Okay, perfect. And Caleb says one of the basic requirements was no breaking of the land. If an existing conservation easement on a tame pasture has a clause that allows periodic rejuvenation, for example, breaking once every 10 years and reseeding of tame grass, would that disqualify that parcel for carbon credits in this system?
Brian, will you take that?
Sure. I think, you know, the intent of this protocol was really to maintain sort of permanent grasslands. So unfortunately, yeah, I think that sort of rejuvenation to a tame a tame pasture wouldn't be allowed under this protocol.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. And Joe is wondering, why are you excluding open water? And is there a pilot program for not draining wetlands in croplands?
Well, I think that, you know, I mean, I guess yeah, I mean, I guess it's like the area of the open water, I guess wasn't being assumed to be drained under the cropland, and it could just be a matter of refining the protocol to sort of exclude that area so that it's not included in the protocol might be the way forward. But that's really the background of that was assuming some of the deeper wetlands might not necessarily be drained, and that's what causes the challenge that if they were drained or not drained. But probably one way is just to assume they're not being drained. But that's the kind of refinement that comes from sort of test driving it to see how much land that people want to put forward that does have permanent wetlands, and then that can be dealt with. As Sayeed said, I mean, part of the role of this was also to sort of look towards a protocol that could work in the compliance market in the future in Canada, and then that would have a lot higher value for the CO2 removed. So these sort of questions are important, and hopefully, you know, revisions can make the protocol more successful in Canada.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everything takes time. And Latifa's wondering, how can we obtain the communication toolkit you mentioned?
Sure. Feel free to reach out to me. Just go to Viresco Solutions website, and we have our like contact us section. Just send us an email. We can share that package with you.
Okay, perfect. That looks like all the questions that we have today, and I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to thank you. Oh, sorry, one more came in here. If average credit is 0.5 tons of carbon per acre per year, what is the average monetary value?
That is a really I would say tricky and complicated question, because it depends on the interest of the large emitter who is willing to purchase that carbon credit. So what we see that in the current carbon market context, the price starts from like $5 Canadian to even like 30 Canadian dollar, but it depends again. So who is kind of the buyer and who is interested to pay that much amount. So sometimes what happens is that before starting the project, we try to talk with a carbon credit buyer so that we can get the price guarantee when we are generating the carbon credits.
Okay, perfect. And Greg is wondering if he could send some background material to you to see if his 99-year lease would be eligible, as well as the other documents such as restrictions placed on us as a habitat conservation area. Would that be okay if he contacted you? Okay.
Sure.
Perfect. And then last question, I guess. Clinton says, in Saskatchewan, the province now claims that wetlands and waterways or adequate outlets are Crown land. So how can the private landowners collect on those?
Again, we have, if those are Crown lands, then we have to really understand whether there is any protection mechanism on those properties. If there is, then those will not be eligible. If there is no protection mechanism, we can prove that clearly and there is no confusion about that, then we can move forward with that project. And just to clarify, the property owner will be eligible for carbon credit, not any other parties here.
Okay. Okay, thank you for answering that. I think we'll call it there because we're already over time. So thank you both so much for the really awesome presentation, and especially for the amazing work that you're doing. Like, this is really a lot of work that you've put into this here, and it's really exciting. There's been a lot of interest in what you've got going on here. So thank you so much for your hard work and for sharing it with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone for catching it, catching our last webinar for Prairie's Got the Goods Week. Feel free to check out our YouTube channel and you can catch webinars that were happening throughout the week. We also have 6 other years worth of webinars that you can find on there as well. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much everyone and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.